Thank you to Karen and David for another fantastic session. It's now time to introduce you to our moderator for the next session this morning, Mike Saltzman, co-founder and COO at EvolutionIQ. Mike leads client engagements and new business ventures for EvolutionIQ. He works hand in hand with the most innovative carriers, TPAs, and self-insured corporations and their executives to reimagine the possibilities of claim handling using advanced and mission-specific artificial intelligence products. Prior to co-founding EvolutionIQ, Mike received his MBA from Stanford University after working as an investor at Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, where he covered insurance and credit markets. Mike, thank you so much for taking the reins today. Without further ado, I'll hand over to you to join yet another esteemed panel of thought leaders, this time to discuss what it takes to deploy AI-powered modeling to reduce the cost of claims. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you everyone for joining us for another good session. Thank you, David and Karen, for an awesome session just before this. I think some of the themes will be in common, and for those of you sticking around, thanks for pushing through another session. It's great to see you all. I'd like to start by introducing EvolutionIQ, and then we'll turn it over and introduce our panelists and take you through what I think will be a really interesting hour talking with experts and thought leaders who are actually implementing these technologies at some of the largest insurers and TPAs on the planet. So briefly speaking, our team in technology is differentiated in that we are mission specific in what Rachel said. That means that instead of boiling the ocean, instead of looking for every possible application of AI, we look at specific problems, specific KPIs, and build solutions to solve them. Everything that we do starts with a KPI we want to impact, the adjuster or staff member who's going to be our partner in that mission, and then a product to go do that. Our clients report happier frontline examiners and adjusters, faster claim resolutions, and significantly lower claim costs and open reserves. But today is not actually about EvolutionIQ. Today is about the opportunity in front of all of us as claims executives, as claim handlers, as managers, and as others around the industry. So with that, I'd like to introduce my partners in crime here, close friends of EvolutionIQ and partners of our business. First, I'll start with Ian Macartney. Ian is the Senior Vice President, Head of Group Innovation and Digital at Argo Group. He joined the group in April 2019 and is responsible for developing and executing Argo's digital strategy. He's been 35 years in the insurance business, both domestically and abroad in both life and P&C markets. A little bit about Ian. Ian's the person you go to when something has to get done. Ian has the vision. He sits on top of the organization, and he really owns outcomes at Argo as if they were his own, which we really appreciate. So Ian, I'll give you a brief moment to introduce yourself. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for that distinguished introduction. I'm not sure, I was looking behind me to see who you were talking about. Seriously, thank you for that. Yeah, it's good to join this panel today. I'm looking forward to a discussion. I think for me, working with EvolutionIQ and also industry professionals and insurtechs to help drive change in the industry are a critical way forward for us all. So I won't say much more than that, but I'm looking forward to the session and looking forward to talking to you and Adam.
Thank you, Ian. Our next guest is Adam Fisher. Adam is the Chief Data Officer for Sedgwick, the world's largest TPA, which needs no introduction itself. Adam leads Sedgwick effort to securely and strategically leverage their claim data to optimize their offerings, to serve their clients better. One thing, a couple of things about Adam from my working relationship with him. Adam is extremely creative, and he has come up through Sedgwick. Interestingly enough, one of his first jobs out of his education was working at Sedgwick as an analyst years ago. He's coming back now at the top of the organization. He's seen every problem, every opportunity. He has a very innovative spirit. And one thing about working with Sedgwick and talking with Adam is they've got more claims than anyone. If anyone has a huge opportunity in front of them, it's Sedgwick, and Adam is the guy at the reins there. So I'll pass it over to Adam for a quick intro.
Thanks, Mike. Really looking forward to the conversation today. Yeah, I love the topic that we're about to dive into and, have a lot of thoughts on it. So can't wait to get started. Thanks for the introduction. Nice to see everybody.
Awesome. So I'm going to start with a premise. And this premise is a closely held belief at our organization, at EvolutionIQ. And I think we share it in common with a lot of our partners. And I know the two partners on the call today. And that's that claims are king. So what does that mean? People say that, it's the golden age of TV with Netflix. It's the golden age of this and that. We believe this is the golden age of claims handling. And that's for a few reasons. Overall, we think that claims have the largest remaining lever on profitability of insurance organizations over the next 10 years. Why is that? Investment returns are down and likely to stay there with low interest rates. That's no secret. Underwriting and distribution have become intensely competitive, both locally and globally, and hyper-competitive, pushing prices down across the board. But when you look at claims, they are the largest share of dollars leaving the organization and have received the lowest innovation over the last 10 years, the slowest pace of change relative to the other kind of core functions of the insurance business. We think that's a huge opportunity. We think that every claims executive, every claims manager should be looking at the next 10 years fervently excited about the opportunity in front of them because of where they're starting today. So to start there, I'd like to dive into a couple themes both beneath that and get Adam and Ian their take on it. So we think that claims are king because of what technology can do to assist in the optimization going forward. The first theme there is that we'll talk about is reactive versus proactive. How do we enable claims handlers and teams to be proactively working on their claims with information at their fingertips that drives impact versus reactive, falling back to process, waiting on information. So we'll dive into that first. Then we'll talk about consistency and outcomes. How do we ensure that claims that are created equal are receiving similar outcomes, both in terms of time and expense to adjudicate them, but also outcomes and indemnity payments? And the last is strategic control. How do we think about decision-making and leading one of these organizations? So maybe we'll start in the beginning. Ian, I'd like to come to you first. If you could talk a little bit about how you see claim handling, that balance between reactive and proactive and where technology can start to bridge that gap.
Thanks, Mike. And I think you hit on some of the challenges. The reality of the claims handling process is we have a lot of people involved in it, whether it's the agent, whether it's the risk manager, whether it's the adjuster, or whether it's the examiner. And that's the challenge, right? It's dependent on human touch. What we need to do is start to bring in technology and the AI to help speed up that process, right? And when you have a claim, you don't usually have one. To your point around Adam's organization, you have hundreds of thousands of them, right? And the reality is there's never enough adjusters to go around. There are never enough examiners to go around. So we really need to start to engage people at the front end, use technology, whether it's handheld applications, whether it's data, whether it's the ability to drive the right information to people's hands, to use technology to partner a lot quicker and be much more proactive around the claim, both pre and post claim, because that's one of the challenges, right? It's a very people-dependent process. And if we don't bring technology to it, it's never going to be proactive.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And maybe, Adam, to bring it to you, one of the things that Ian hinted at that I love is the idea of partnering. You're partnering technology with adjusters, with their managers. Obviously, this is a hugely people-driven, operation and part of the business. At Sedgwick, arguably the most adjusters, you guys have the most of everything in the world, so we can just kind of dispense with repeating that. How do you think about partnering with your associates and your colleagues on the technology side as it comes to claims? What do they need? Where are they today? And what are kind of the stepping stones to get them to the most optimized state where technology and humans are working hand in hand?
Yeah, great question. I think of it as just having to be just really seamless, right? We have a lot of different systems at Sedgwick, and we have, this process has been so operational heavy, and really to date, it's all about kind of like these triggers that, a claim gets to a certain point and there's a trigger that happens and then it's referred to another party. So there's this constant handoff that's happening, and, that's a perfect opportunity for, AI and technology to really help with that handoff and make that even more seamless, and to be watching, this body of claims, this huge number, that's developing, because examiners are, required to look at a pretty big number on their own, yet there's hundreds of thousands of things happening around them. So the true power of AI is to really take advantage of all of that past history and incorporate it into their workflow so that they can take advantage of it today and, into the future and keep learning. So I think of it as needing to be just really seamless because, they don't have a lot of time to dig into it. It really just needs to be ingrained in their workflow. Much like before the advent of all this technology, there were, notes and details and kind of operational layers that kind of help that happen. Technology can be a catalyst for all those same efforts. So it's organic in its kind of integration instead of just a bunch of technology forced on them, which I think is, where it's maybe failed before. It's been too much.
Right. I love that theme about seamless integration, and I think we'll come back to that a little bit later in the discussion. I wanted to, now that we've kind of set the stage, zoom out a little bit and ask for both of your takes on, kind of where we're headed. So, everyone on this call is in the driver's seat of their organization. They're, thinking about what are the investments I can make in the future, but more than the investments, what is my roadmap? Where am I trying to get to? To Adam, to your point, you can drive this ship, you can optimize any number of different, points along the claims journey. So let's envision the future a little bit. So Adam, maybe start with you. What does 5 years forward look like if you have won the next 5 years? Where are the best carriers going to be starting from where they are today, 5 years forward? What are the main differences? And kind of what are the, kind of core technology themes that they're going to be using to get there?
Yep. It's definitely AI, so I'm glad we're talking about that today. But, I think of it as more of like, taking advantage of all of that past history, no matter how much you have. Some have more than others, right? But, today it's about, looking at a small number of historical kind of outcomes and using that to predict and proxy, things that are new today. So I think, real success is, once that's happening on 100% of your incoming volume. I'd be surprised if any carrier TPA anywhere is really at that level where they're taking, 100% of everything that they touch goes through some model in real time. I think, that's been a challenge of this trigger-based kind of view is that things are on these processes. Maybe they're looking at things on a 5-day basis or 10-day basis, and there's all these windows that everything has to fall into. So I think the first step is really turning that into a more seamless and continuous kind of, loop, and really starting at the bottom. I've seen a lot of organizations, you really jump in at the deep end. They're trying to target very large losses and these litigated claims and any of the things that, we know from experience take years to really settle. So I think the bigger opportunities are at the shallow end of the pool, the things that maybe close with no payment on them, which happens quite a lot. So I think, those that really innovate in this space are going to do a couple things. They're going to use their histories, however long they are, some, longer than others, and they're going to build models that really flex on all of the incoming volume that they have in the future. And then the explainability is a huge piece. I've seen so many models at Sedgwick and before that, they just have a score, they have an indicator, and they don't really tell you much else about, why this triggered or what this really means. And that's the seamless in the explainability part, that an examiner is an expert at understanding where a claim's going to go. And a lot of times they're not surprised by what a model output might be telling them. So getting on their same page and explaining to them why this model triggered and the reasons, the exact text from a note that kind of led to this conclusion, I think that's how you really get the support of the examiner. It's not one or the other. It's a 100% both. It's an effort between the examiner. You're giving the examiner and the claims handler superpowers by feeding them the right information at the right time.
Totally agree. Ian, how are we doing against the Argo 5-year plan? What are similarities, differences? If we look at the carrier side versus the TPA side, are we interchanging things? Are we adding to what Adam said? Where are we?
Well, I think it's, for us, it's really about, in the industry as a whole, it's about breaking it down into individual silos and how you deal with it, right? So I'll use an example at Argo where we've done that for the underwriting process. So if we apply that to the claims process, it's all about taking each one and identifying the issues and then fixing them, right? So if we take, whether it's a personal lines carrier or a P&C carrier, looking at, to Adam's point, a lot of the claims people, adjusters spend time wasted on no claims, right? So using technology, whether it's drones or other technology, to take those out, to take away the wasted time so that adjusters can actually focus on the real claims that are out there. Looking at the first notice of loss process and how you speed that up and use technology to get more information into the examiner's hands and the adjuster's hands to quickly solve the claim rather than it go to a longer term claim. And then as part of that longer term process, using models to really help you stopping it moving forward to being a long-term claim that gets into litigation. So for each one, from an Argo perspective, we're breaking it down, seeing where we can digitize it, automate it, and then speed up the process, but also alleviate the adjuster and the examiner's time and actually put more technology in the customer's hands or the broker's hands. So I think from an operational standpoint, I think that's really the way you're going to get at it, because there's many issues in there, and just dealing with one isn't enough. You have to deal with them all.
So I'd love to stick there for a second. I think both of you said something very interesting, in your own words, which is this concept of mission specific. I think Adam said, start in the shallow end and build up to the deep end. Ian's talking about breaking things down and solving them, one by one. I think that resonates a lot with our team and how we think about the opportunities, rather than boiling the ocean and trying to rebuild this entire, Amazon warehouse from the start up. Talk about, in out. What do we have? Where is it going? What's better? Where can we make meaningful improvements? To Adam's point, looking for, that shallow end of the pool where you can solve issues, bring KPIs to leadership, and have wins early. I'm curious how you all think about either internal work that you can do with your own. I know both of you have meaningful investments in data science and other capabilities in-house. How do you think about mission-specific work with either internal teams or sourcing externally with vendors? Where do you go internally? Where do you go externally? We can start with Ian on that one.
Yeah, I think you're aware, Mike. From an Argo perspective, we've heavily invested in the insurtech world. We had our own fund management, which was just spun off, and we purposely invested in insurtechs to help the organization. I think any organization, having been in the insurance world for 35 years, that you're not going to do it on your own, right? You really need to bring in smart people to help you solve the problem, but you also need to bring in smart people to learn and fail fast to help to solve that. From our perspective at Argo, we have a digital team who understands the technology needs we have, but we need to bring in, we've brought in companies like yourself to help us solve for challenges we can't solve for or we need help on. We can provide you with the insurance knowledge, but we don't have the technology or the capability to get to the solution. So I think it's all about partnership for us. It's partnering with insurtechs, working alongside with them, presenting the problem, working through the problem, and sometimes failing more than you expect, but actually keeping at it until you get to the solution. Because, if Rome was built in a day, it wasn't in the insurance world, that's for sure. So, for us, it's really about partnering, working with companies like yourself, and also coming together around, ideas that the industry has never thought of, because the industry is very focused on its own problems, and really bringing in smarter people to look with different lenses.
Adam, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think it's all about more of everything, right? So, more data science on our own accord, more integration with our larger data team. So part of, the excitement for me of rejoining Sedgwick after being away for so many years is this opportunity, which is now in play, where, our team of data scientists, which was formerly part of our IT organization, is now part of our larger P&C data team. So, that's 100 people that every day are focused on, solving problems for our clients, the biggest brands in the world. And that mix is really powerful. I can't stress enough that kind of like synergy. I worked in all kinds of different capital markets and other technology focuses before with modeling. And the idea has always been, oh, just get a bunch of really talented data scientists, throw them at the problem, and, magic will come out of the other end. And I just don't think that's true. The greatest benefit of bringing the subject matter experts with the, statisticians, that's where the magic really happens. So I'm excited that we're doing that organically at Sedgwick. And then the other part, and this is frankly why I'm excited to work with parties like EvolutionIQ, we get approached by anybody and everybody that wants to do cool things with tech, and, they have data scientists. Well, that's not enough. I really want to work with companies that, want to be in the insurance industry. And then for us, even more than that, they want to be in the claims segment of the insurance industry. I want to work with those partners because I think they have way more to offer. That mix of, statisticians and subject matter experts that are on my team, they'll speak our language versus just some fill in the blank, technology consulting company that happens to have data scientists. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And I think, it comes back to a theme that we've talked about a lot, and I think we'll continue to talk about in this conversation even itself, is the AI is not the model. Impactful AI is not a model. Impactful AI is a great model, great data, and a great product to deploy it, and people on the other side who are using it, trusting it, and implementing, its recommendations or whatever the synergy is. So couldn't agree more that honestly, the model is one of four, and that's pretty much all it is. We do believe that over time, the focus has to be on access to data. To Adam's point earlier, are you running things every 10 days because it's a pain in the rear to get the data, or is it continuous? Are you really getting the insights as soon as they're available? Couldn't agree more on that. So I thought one thing that we can touch on now as part of a kind of a segue here is, so we've talked about internal teams and external teams. We talked about, mission-specific technologies. How do we think about, what really are the foundational building blocks for success in using AI to reduce claim costs? Let's get real specific here. What I'd love to talk about are, where in the claims stack do we see opportunities? Ian hinted a little bit at, avoiding litigation by getting on top of claims earlier. Adam, you've been talking a little bit about, those early claims, maybe those zero pay claims. If we're starting from scratch here or close to it, and we're looking at the opportunity set in front of us, and we see a conveyor belt of claims that starts over here and it's branching into little rivers as we go farther and farther, and way on the other end is this, hellish litigation environment. What are the options along that conveyor belt, and where should we be focusing our time as, P&C carriers that are starting this journey or kind of midway through it? How do we think about the framework across that option set? Adam, what do you think on that?
It definitely has to be as early in the claim as possible. And we've made incredible investments and apparently winning awards and, kind of the basis of our global intake process and the ability to intake claims. So you have a pretty level playing field regarding like all that awesome information that comes in on a claim, at that very beginning stage. And like we've been talking about up to this point, it's really about, okay, all those like kind of repetitive processes that you have to do on every claim. Yeah. Those are the biggest opportunities to automate, and taking that time out of the process then gives, those varying levels of expertise that are then going to come in on the claim, whether it's, a senior examiner or a litigation expert or even a clinician in many cases, really gets them into the claim at the right time, and all that other information is kind of there for them. So you're not wasting any of the time in the transfer or really, I think of maybe in the past, kind of like this linear view of like how claims have to flow. And we really want to take that to be kind of like the simultaneous nature of how claims can evolve. And then I think they reach their ultimate outcome a lot faster. And, it's been said for years that, the longer a claim stays open, the more expensive it gets, the more likely it could become litigated. So knowing that, if we apply the right technology and we have that simultaneous kind of action, okay, we could actually shorten the life of every single claim. And if it's not short, we'll have reasons and we'll understand why. And today I don't think it's rare that you hear like a good reason for why any claim takes longer than it necessarily should.
Right. So I'm going to come to Ian in just a moment, but I do want to note for the audience, if you have questions about anything we're talking about, any of these subtopics, please write them in and we'll take some questions on the fly. I see a few coming in right now and I'll try to get to those as soon as I can. But Ian, where are you seeing the opportunity if we're looking at this kind of continuous innovation cycle and this continuous kind of knowledge delivery that Adam's talked about, getting the right information to the right people at all points in time. Where are you focusing, or where are you seeing the most innovative opportunities there?
Well, I mentioned earlier we've done a lot of work around this on the submission and the underwriting side. And what we're finding in the underwriting side is by understanding what an underwriter needs to deliver a quote quickly has really helped us drive time, speed, best-in-class service. So on the claim side, it's very similar, right? It goes back to the people, right? So how much information does an adjuster need? How capable is that adjuster? Because you've got to look at that too, right? If you deliver a lot of information to a junior adjuster who doesn't understand it, are you really doing them a service, or are you really confusing them, right? So for us, it's really about what information, what level of an adjuster are you, and what level of claim are you handling, and what level of information should you get to help you there, right? Do you understand the coverage? Do you understand what information do you need to handle this claim? So there's a lot of aspects there. For us, really, it's looking at that adjuster capability, making sure those adjusters have the experience and the capability to handle the information they're about to get, and they actually know what to do with it. So we've got more work to do in that, I think, in all sectors. But the industry has, I'm not, from an Argo perspective, I think that's the same as the industry, right? Making sure your adjusters have the experience and the knowledge to handle the information they're about to receive. They understand what it tells them, and then they understand how to use it, right? And to make sure that the claim doesn't run for a long time, and it can quickly turn the claim around. And that's both for the adjuster and the examiner.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and brings us to something that that Adam and I were talking about over breakfast a few weeks ago. This concept of AI in the pipes or AI in front of adjusters. You can kind of use it either way. So at EvolutionIQ, we have built and deployed production systems to large top 10 carriers that both present adjusters with information, to Ian's point. Here's what we're seeing on this claim, here's why, and here's our explainability factors, here's the suggestion for next steps. That's kind of flavor A. And that's obviously front and center. It's a change management exercise, all of that. Option B is it's in the pipes, meaning, perhaps the adjuster doesn't even know who EvolutionIQ is. Perhaps a claim just comes to them because of some triage system. Perhaps there's just an action being triggered by insights on EvolutionIQ's part that are totally API driven or behind the scenes. Adam, can you talk to us a little bit about how you think about kind of AI, front and center for the frontline folks, or AI in the pipes?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly a bigger fan of kind of like AI in the pipes, but I realize that that's like a little bit harder to pull off. And I think about it as kind of like, the way like any consumer would, that, more and more our daily interactions are kind of encompassed by AI in pipes, especially as we're exposed to like and use, social media and things like that. So there's lots of awesome AI and tech happening in those pipes. And we respond to it, and we learn to think that that is the easiest way to like kind of go around our lives. And I think for examiners, maybe that is an indicator of how AI can be even more effective. That, before this technology process, they're used to getting a claim assigned to them, getting diary information, this triage process, and they're kind of recipients of the upstream, kind of engine that uses them as a input into an ultimate output. So I think AI in the pipes for them is this idea of a delightful experience in any AI capacity. How do we delight their experience, speed up things that, they think are repetitive? Even the most senior examiners on the planet have components of their job that are probably repetitive, and they themselves are probably like, well, why couldn't this happen faster? This is maybe less, I'm driving less value here than this part where I'm, negotiating, the finality on this outcome. So I think, AI in the pipes is a better way to really move kind of the needle regarding, that population of examiners. Effectively, they're our customer in a lot of ways of how they use AI and how they make decisions. And the more they begin to kind of depend on things that happen in those pipes, the more leeway they might give and the more tolerance they would have to do other innovative things. I think some of the feedback that I've had in talking directly to examiners is, hey, this model is telling me something that I already knew. Or, I could have predicted that this was going to be litigated. I could have predicted this was going to be a large loss. So the model's not doing as much for them as, hey, I, sent this follow-up note, or here, I drafted this follow-up note. Oh, wow, you actually saved me 10 minutes. Like, that is a different value proposition for that examiner. And I think maybe more along the lines of ways to really scale across, for handling thousands of claims daily, that really can have operational benefits.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It comes back to the explainability piece, but I think the overall theme here is trust. And how do you get the frontline staff and the managers who work with them to trust and engage with this innovation? For obvious reasons, it can be threatening, if you kind of just, are not privy to the goals and the real commitment that both sides have to making it work for everyone. It can be threatening. Is it job replacing? Is it, doing something that I want to do? And, critical to our work and a lot of the partnership that we've had with both of you all is, how do you bring adjusters on board and show them, look, this is certainly not replacing you. This is making your job 95% where you shine and 5% other stuff versus 50-50. We're going to put you on top of the situations, the levers, the decision points where you can have the most impact. So Ian, I wonder, along the different types of innovation you've seen, including the work on the underwriting side and intake side you've talked about, what are kind of some of the best practices to building trust with the frontline staff who are ultimately going to be put in some conference room and say, hey, we just contracted with this company and they're now changing that. And, how do you win in that conversation in the rollout thereafter?
Well, I think it's critical to have them engaged from day one, right? I think that's where we have sort of won a watch, if that's the right expression, because if you don't engage them, then they lose trust. If you try to force it down their throat, I think as you look at process, one of the things we've done in Argo is spend a lot of time using BPE to understand the process, before we actually try to help solve it. It's like, putting out a brand new engine in a crappy car, if I can use that analogy. It's not going to work, right? So I think understanding the process and understanding what the challenges are, to Adam's point, if an adjuster says, look, I could have predicted that, but you fixed 30 minutes in the process for me where I now don't have to do that, so I can spend more time on other claims, right? So I think there's a lot of steps. So engaging them, understanding what they do every day, engaging and solutions for them, not just from an information perspective, but looking at all aspects of what they do. And then saying, here's how we can help solve it, engage them in those solutions, engage them in the selection of those solutions, right. And making sure they're part of the pilot, they give input. So I think it's all about communication, engagement, and understanding their challenges, to Adam's point, I think, because if not, if you just try to force it down their throat, you're going to lose. So I think that's one of the things that I believe has been successful at Argo, and I believe is a success for everybody on the call if you want to really make this work.
Yeah. So I'll go to an audience question because it's just on this point. So we have a member of the audience who asked, Adam talked about utilizing on-the-line folk, meaning examiners or nurses or adjusters, to help with understanding the models. How should we be looking for these people? So many just want to do their job and are unwilling to take the time to think about what a model might be saying or help the modelers understand how to fit the pieces together. The reason I love this question is because it gets to, in the deployment phase, how are you bringing people along both to make the model better, literally, with that context and insight. Adam was talking earlier about, you want to pair data scientists with context and product people, but also how do you start getting the on-the-line people excited and bought in? So Adam, any thoughts, and Ian will come to you because actually in our Argo engagement, we've done a lot of this type of work specifically, but any thoughts about, how are you bringing your people along and bringing them into the process to make the product better? How are you finding these people?
Yeah, luckily we have a very large pool and audience to kind of pull from. And, one reason I came back to Sedgwick is it's like an incredibly collaborative kind of organization. So, I haven't observed that yet. I've found that as we, dig into a problem and really want to solve and make it better. And this kind of comes back to like treating it like a product, saying, hey, this ultimate model is going to be, even if it's an internal product, an internal effort, whatever you want to call it, but the ultimate benefactor is actually the on-the-line people. So, my advice would be you've got to frame it to benefit them, right? Like they're the ones that, are going to use it every day, and they're going to know if it's good or not. This is the same as if you were to go make any consumer product. Like, how do you know that people would want to eat that, power bar or drink that beverage, right? Like, you have some inclination of like what flavors and kind of packaging they might appreciate. And that's the other benefit for at least us, where, if we have, our data people and our data scientists are part of one team, well, they're a lot closer to understanding like what the on-the-line folks actually do. Like we have people on our data team that, are former adjusters or former clinicians. So, we don't have to look that far to find, good opinions on what we should be building or doing. But there is an important kind of gap there between, okay, we've got something that's a prototype, and then we want to roll it out to that larger population. Of course, we don't ever want to force it on anybody. We want their buy-in. We want their, adoption of it. We want to measure that adoption. So I think it's really about seeking their opinion in a kind of a non-biased way. It's like, hey, like, what would a model have to say for you to respond to it? What's a part of your process that you think takes a lot of time that you wish you didn't have to spend as much time on? There's collaboration that can happen. And I think that is probably like the best way to start on a path where eventually you get to a model that is doing many other things, right? But you can't really get off the starting line until you, like I said before, like save somebody 5 minutes and get deliver some value to them, or at least work towards, that initial value delivery.
Right. Ian, I'm curious on this point as well. We talk about explainability a bit, and I think we'll continue because it's such an important theme. But, the adjusters, the on-the-line folks who make this investment that Adam's talking about as we're deploying this model, coming out of it, when it's deployed, you really want to serve them back to something that continues building that trust that they continue to resonate with. How do you think about explainability and kind of, what are the types of explainable factors, not specifically, but how do you think about bridging a gap where someone, to Adam's point, goes, yes, this makes sense to me. Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm now going to dive into this, versus it's a score, it's 94 out of 100. It could be 62 and it's just a number. It's just a 2-digit number.
Well, I think it goes back to what I said. I think helping them understand what you're trying to achieve, right? If you drop it on them, and they're not going to really understand it. I think it's making sure they're engaged throughout the process to understand, what does this mean at any level, right? What does the score mean? How do I react to that score? What do I need to do with that score? What are the actions I take around that? Or do I need to do anything, right? So I think it's more about helping everybody understand with it, and also looking at, would you be doing, how you deliver that and who you deliver it to. Are you giving some of these lower level results to your senior adjusters? Of course not. So it's making sure that the audience that you're delivering this information to is relevant to the information they're getting, so that they can make best of their time to actually use that information and go forward. It's, when you've got information that's really critical to a claim and it's going to be definitely going to move to a high level claim, you want your senior folks there front and center, and you want them dealing with it quickly. If it's something that you can, not as critical, but you want it to be used with adjusters to help them learn and move forward. But then again, I think it's all about how you use the data and how the leaders allocate that work and help them understand it. But I think, again, it's understanding communication, making sure the right audience is getting the information, and making sure the audience understands what to do with the information when it's delivered.
So I have an audience question here that I'd like to flag, and it relates to what we're talking about here, which is, we are early in our journey of organizing our data, and we don't yet have bulk access to our unstructured data, but it's coming soon. Okay. So what is the promise of unstructured data? Why is everyone talking about it? Obviously, EvolutionIQ has made it a core feature of our innovation and our focus, but why is this so interesting? What's the promise of it? Why can't we just do stuff with, 10 rows and columns, man? What's the problem? Adam, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first is, there's good news. Like, you can do a lot with the structured data. So don't just wait until you have the unstructured data, because it's kind of this end all be all. It, might represent kind of a step lift function and kind of like your ultimate outcome, but there's a ton that you can do with the structured data. And I don't think it's until you've done something with the structured data that you would even be in a great position to know what you should be doing with the unstructured data. So I kind of view them as kind of like components in an ultimate, outcome of a model, and, the explainability can be assigned to all those different, attributes, right? And, in our models, we see tons of lift from, structured data, and then increasing elements of attributes that have like more text in them, maybe like an event description or a loss description. But yeah, there's a ton of promise, and there's a ton of innovation really happened. This question about if we looked 5 years ago and we kind of looked into the future 5 years ago, maybe we could have predicted that there's been a ton of innovation around like what can be done with like, NLP and deep learning, and really all this like innovation around unstructured data, which is a lot of it's text. And luckily, like our industry has a ton of text data. The notes on a claim can really add up. I mean, we see claims with hundreds of notes. That's a lot of unstructured data, and a lot of it is like emails that are kind of flowing to and from different parties, and there's a lot of detail in there. So, if you can tap into that data, combine it with what you know about the structured data, then I think you can really start to target models around some of these, 5-minute savings kind of workflows that you can offer to your examiner. And once you have enough of those 5-minute savings, you're starting to save lots of time, and you're starting to really benefit the process. And you're doing it, AI system can run through 100,000 claims in a minute. So that's how you really start to fire on all cylinders.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one thing to add there from our experience working with clients, specifically on the unstructured data side, is it can kind of hit two birds with one stone that we've been talking about here. So the first is the insights will be better, to Adam's point. You'll see a step up, step function rise in accuracy, predictive impact. And mostly in our experience, that's because once a claim is in flight, most of the nuance in that claim is really held in the unstructured data. When a claim starts out, a lot of it's in the structured data. But 4, 6, 8 months into a liability claim, you've learned a tremendous amount of new information, most of which is not captured in structured data. So the ongoing, to Adam's original point, the ongoing updates, the ongoing kind of analysis of that claim really does depend, in mid and late stages on the unstructured data. But on the assisting the adjuster, to Adam's point, you've got 100 notes on a claim, and I'm doing my thing today, or maybe it just got transferred to me and I'm a senior adjuster and so I'm live on this claim. How can we take you to the 5 notes that matter? Because I promise all 100 don't. How can we really zero you in and help you spend 5 minutes familiarizing yourself with this claim versus 2 hours reading every correspondence, everything back and forth? So helping clients and their adjuster teams know what is the marginal impact on this claim? What is actually driving its severity? Not every correspondence moves the needle. There are typically a few really important factors on a claim that are really driving the bulk of, where it's probably going to settle out. How do you put those in front of an adjuster, as fast as possible? We've seen that can add a ton of trust because, to Adam's point, adjusters are saying, one, this is, first of all, just saved me a ton of time. Thank you. I can now get a coffee. And 2, great. I do understand the claim, and I agree by and large with what the model is saying on whatever predicted output, severity, litigation risk, medical severity or propensity for the next marginal treatment or surgery or what have you. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go to one more audience question. So and this is a good one for Ian and then for Adam, because I think both of you all are bridging this. What are the challenges of integrating new tech, AI, ML vendors with legacy systems? How do they address system overload? So Ian, we'll come to you all. I know that Argo has undergone a lot of kind of core system shifts. There are some legacy data still on some older systems. There's new systems. How do you think about partnering with bleeding edge technology when maybe the back of the house that might serve that with data is not quite there yet?
Well, I think the key to that is not to try and boil the ocean, right? If you try to integrate a new claims capability into back-end, so let's just take Argo, we're a company of acquisitions. We've got 18 different acquisitions. By the time we actually tried to do that, the experience would have gone and would have lost the opportunity. It'd be 10, 15 years down the road. So I think you have to separate that. You think you have to say to yourself, we have to keep that separate. Let's look at how we can evolve this capability outside of that and utilize data, to Adam's point, to actually supplement that, right? So the data we have, whether it's structured or unstructured data, and pull that through to what we're doing with EvolutionIQ or any other organization. So I think you have to keep them separate, because even in an Argo, a small to medium insurance company like Argo, it's still difficult to do. In a larger organization, it's a nightmare, having worked in some of those large organizations. So I think you have to keep them separate, but you also have to make sure you leverage that other structured and unstructured data that's out there in your own capability to bring it into play, or else you'll never get it done. That's just the reality of that with systems that are outdated and why we are trying to change them.
You can see why we love working with Ian. He's not a man who likes to wait. He's a man who likes to say, I get it. That's the problem. Where's the solution?
Yeah.
Adam, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. I mean, working with all the variety of the systems and the data, I kind of, that's a blessing and a curse. I think it's something that no matter how hard you try, and we have a number of systems and our goal is to reduce that number, but have to expect that number is probably gonna grow too, right? And we just have to face reality and kind of bite the bullet and believe that, okay, the diversity of the data that comes into our ecosystem, that's one of the challenges, but it's also one of the opportunities. That we have, a ton of data from our flagship claim system, Juris. It's an incredible system. It's been, constantly improved over, I don't know how many decades. But it's great. And we're really good at converting other systems into it. But we still have yet other systems that we keep and use where we need to kind of increase the diversity of data that we bring to our models. And really for any model, whether it's this industry or any other, the diversity of the data that you tap into, that is the greatest future value of kind of what any model or any process that you can predict will kind of use. So, I think the future for us is taking advantage of even more of the diversity in our own ecosystem, but then even tapping into third-party data to bring even more context to what we already know, and as soon in that process as possible. If we get a claim and we, no matter what system it might live in, enriching that data with other information that we can obtain quickly and inexpensively, it's only going to lead to success factors on, the benefit and the power of any, downstream model or process.
So I think that's a good segue to this next question, which is whoever asked this in the audience, I appreciate your vulnerability. The question is, for late adopter carriers, for folks who are not on the bleeding edge, how do they minimize risk? No one likes an initiative that doesn't work. I'm freelancing here, but no one likes an initiative that doesn't work. No one likes sticking their neck out to support some vendor and there's a bunch of overpromises and it's their promise to the world and what comes back is less than. So how do you think about, for folks who know that their culture is just not I'm first, but they don't want to be last either? How can they think about, what strategy can they think about to minimize the risk, but maximize the opportunity to use some of these technologies, get them embedded in a way that is, commensurate with their company culture, which is, probably to take as a given? I realize I'm talking to two early adopters, but that said, why don't we start with Ian?
Well, I think that, having worked in very large organizations where it's difficult to move anything, right? I think the secret is to start small. I don't think it's a secret, but I think that's the reality of it. So you have to start small, especially in the situation and the question that's being asked, because it can take months, if not years, to try to do it on a large scale. I think starting small, working on a pilot, as we did that here at Argo. So working on a pilot that proves a success, you get good results. That really then drives interest. It drives investment in that. So I think really that's the key to it. I don't think it's any more difficult than that in a large organization where you're not first and you don't want to be last, and you want to prove that it works and there's a real ability and capability to expand it and get investment and input from senior execs. That would be my advice.
Adam, same question. Anything to add?
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's nothing wrong with that. Lots of successful initiatives have come later and have had the opportunity to watch others kind of walk the plank, so to speak,
right.
on how things kind of pan out, right? And on top of that, we've seen in the last kind of 5 years, like we were talking about before, just amazing innovation and evolution regarding, the ease of adoption and the ease of application of some of these tools that if, you're able to get your hands on, your data in mass. And, in our industry, I think a lot of claims data is trapped in, relatively approachable databases, relational data. It's not like, out in the tech world where things have to happen at the millisecond level or in these weird, structures. The data is actually pretty easy to access. So I think if you're really trying to avoid risk and kind of set out on a path, then that means, if in the pool analogy, it's like, well, you're not even in the shallow end. Maybe you're over in the kiddie pool, right? You're in the water that's maybe like a foot deep because you just want to prove the benefit of something just really concise and really, achievable so that you can then jump over into the shallow end. So just limit your scope.
And so on that point specifically, as we think about, designing an initiative, designing a POC or a pilot, to Ian's point, how should we be thinking about KPIs? What are we actually measuring? Is it okay to just measure the vendor's self-reported accuracy? Should we have some real-world metrics? I mean, great, we've been working with a vendor or an internal group for 4 or 5 months. They have what they call results. What do good results look like? How do I define them at the start of this journey when I'm sure it's going to take an ebb and a flow? How do I think about getting to a place where I'm going to have clarity in my decision? Is this worthwhile? Is the juice worth the squeeze? And how do I articulate that to my leadership team? Ian, starting with you, I know that you were intimately involved in our POC process. You've worked on a number before, but how do you structure a great, initial engagement? How do you think about KPIs and where does that process take you?
I think it's back to something that said earlier. The head of operations, my goal is to understand the process and all the challenges within it. And I think, from a vendor perspective, you can't necessarily solve them all, but you can help solve some of them, right? And some of those are hidden to you because you bring in a certain aspect of it, right? So for me in the claims process, giving the adjuster more time or focusing senior adjusters to handle specific claims with the data provided. To Adam's point earlier, is making sure that if you provide the data that at the end of the day, you've also fixed the fact that they don't need to do this, this, or this, and they get the information, but you've saved them a ton of time by giving them the information and you've fixed some of that process. So I think KPIs are not just necessarily about what the vendor brings, and they're not also about money all the time. They're also about, in terms of coming back from the vendor, it could be that you've saving a lot of time in the process. Therefore, the examiner or the adjusters handled more claims. So you've turned those around. So there's many benefits if you understand the process properly, which I'm sure a lot of the audience do, that a vendor can help you get to because they're helping to speed up or make the process more proactive. So there's lots of ways. So it could be internal and external in terms of those KPIs. I know from our experience with you guys, as we look at it, it's also not just about the KPIs we have with you. It's about our own internal KPIs around the process and helping train adjusters in terms of their experience. So there's that piece as well.
Yeah, Adam, I know that you are a man of many initiatives at Sedgwick right now. And I know you're spinning up a lot of different new work streams and new initiatives kind of concurrently. Are there any themes that weave through all of them in terms of, how you think, because they're all different things, but how you think about making sure you're going to have clarity?
Yeah, I think so. And for me, it just comes down to it kind of touches on this KPI conversation you're just having around, how do we measure, like, if anything that we're doing is useful and successful, and how do we know that it's pervasive enough to matter? And the way I think of it is just, our goal or my goal with the team and building kind of a function at Sedgwick that is just really focused on data and becoming data-driven, more data-driven. We've always been data-driven, but to become even more data-driven, how do we start to measure that through all the different initiatives and processes that we have, through all the parts of the claim, whether it's like referring it to the right resource at the right time, or, doing more transactional things on claims like mitigating fraud or achieving subrogation, or even in other parts of our business where we have, lots of pictures that we need to look at. Like, why should people look at these pictures if all we're trying to do is get, 100 different labels around a picture that if anybody picked a random picture and looked at it and would say, yeah, 99% of these labels are accurate. I think of the KPIs and kind of that kind of simple basis of, okay, well, are we touching more of the data? Are we using more and more of the data in future processes and in future flows? And are we, getting even that qualitative feedback from all of our stakeholders, the, clinicians, the examiners, the specialty teams that say, hey, I like on a scale of 1 to 7, I give this a 6. Like this actually saved me some time. And like where I've seen all these like data initiatives fail before, and I used to work at a really big bank, it was when you started to talk to executives around, precision, recall, F1, KS scores, AUC, like don't do that. Really come down to a level of, hey, this model's 200% better at determining this than a person is. And when that happens, it saves 30%, it's 30% cheaper or it's 20% faster. These are the ways that we can communicate the results and then zoom in on the ones that we really want to target and take further action on.
Yeah, great. Well, I've been given the yellow light. I go to a lot of comedy shows, and I know when the yellow light comes on, it's time to start wrapping up. The music is starting to play. So I guess I'd ask for each of you, give us something to look forward to. Why is this really exciting? Me and my team, we all left other jobs. We came into this industry because we thought claims are just the bee's knees, and they're just the largest opportunity going forward. You all are spending a lot or all of your time in this space. Why? Adam, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, it's that there's something about the claims data and the process that I really love because I believe it to be kind of approachable and understandable that, no matter what part of the world or line or coverage, claims have a lot in common, right? There's a unique identifier, there's a date of loss, there's a date that it opened, there's very intricate financials. It's just a really scalable population to start to take action on. And there's this huge feedback loop where you have all these stakeholders, both the claimant themselves, you have the client that may be, kind of on the hook for the cost, and then you have all those handlers in the middle. So there's just a lot of ecosystem to really take action on and start to impact. So it seems like a very, like we talked about earlier, it's a meaty population. It's ripe for, I hate to say disruption, but I guess we could call it that,
And Ian, why do you spend part of your day innovating on the claims side?
Well, I think like Adam, to me, I'm the worst guy to ever look at your process. If I walk in a store or buy a suit or do anything, I'm like, that doesn't work. So for me, it's like there's so much opportunity there. And so much opportunity to do better. It's not that it's a bad process. I just think there's so much opportunity, as Adam said, to really get at it and do a lot better job, bring better class service to the front end client and engage the front end client to really help get that claims sorted a lot quicker. I just think there's so much opportunity, but it's opportunity that's not about replacing people. It's about enhancing the experience and being able to really, to your point, you started with looking at the capital aspect of the business and actually reducing the outlay of that because you're actually making a huge difference. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there and a lot of opportunity to make it exciting, bringing in new technology, saving a lot of capital, but also providing a first-class service to the front-end client, as well as our partners and brokers in there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us and also for the partnership that we've had off camera, which has been fantastic. And I hope will continue for many years. For all of you on the session, thank you for joining us. I hope the rest of the day is great. I'll be on the platform for the conference if you want to reach out. If you want to send a direct message, my email is mike@evolutioniq.com. We're happy to talk about any claims initiative that you have, share some of our success stories with more specificity, and just kind of take it from there. So thank you, everyone, for participating, and have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Mike, for your excellent moderation today. Thank you also to Adam and Ian for taking the time out to share their insights. And thank you to those of you in the audience, especially those of you who submitted questions to the panel. Much appreciated. It's now time for a short break, so grab a coffee, but please do make the most of this time. I know nothing meets hanging out in person, shaking hands, but with all that on hold for the time being, please do remember to reach out to each other via the community function on the Bizzabo app so that you can make some useful connections over the next couple of days. And don't forget, we'll be back shortly at 12:40 p.m. Eastern, when we'll be discussing how to combat new fraud trends with innovative tools. So we'll see you very soon.